Hi, I'm Amanda, and today I'm going to walk you through how I did the Everest Base Camp Trek solo. More importantly, how my solo trek was legal. There is a whole lot of misinformation going around right now about whether or not solo trekking is legal and how it can be done and what you have to do to be able to do your solo trek. So I'm hopefully going to clear some of this up. I booked my entire trek and all of my Asia travel in the beginning of January of this year. So from the 1st of January until the 15th of January, I spent 2 straight weeks researching and booking everything. And by the 15th of January, every single thing for my entire month through Asia was completely paid for and my itinerary was totally set. The only thing I didn't have was my medical travel insurance and my hotel in Kathmandu. Everything else was done. That includes I paid for my tea houses, I had paid for my international flight, I paid for everything. The only thing I didn't take into account was that the Nepalese government out of nowhere would suddenly introduce a new law saying that guides were required, but there is a limitation to that. And I think this is where a lot of the misunderstanding comes in, is especially with law, and I say this with love, a lot of people that don't understand the law and they read something that is someone else's interpretation of it and it's wrong, and then that interpretation gets reinterpreted, and it's just the misinformation just continues to spread, and it just gets worse and worse until it gets way down to the consumer, and by then it's very far from the truth. So I was getting ready to leave. I was maybe a week out from leaving, and I had logged in to finalize those last 2 things that I hadn't done. And then it occurred to me that I forgot to double check if yellow fever was required in order to get a visa into Nepal. I could not remember. So I started searching around, and it took me a really long time. I couldn't find this information. So I remember I was searching for probably close to an hour, and somewhere towards the end of that search, I ran into a letter from the government saying that you could no longer, it said that you had to have a guide through just the national parks that go through the Everest Base Camp Trail, and I think that was taking effect. I think it had just taken effect, just taken effect, and I was crushed. Again, everything was paid for, and the reason I chose Everest Base Camp over some of the other really big special treks is because I wanted to do it by myself. And it wasn't about the money, it wasn't about anything other than I really like to be involved in the process. I want to make my own arrangements, I want to figure things out, and if someone else does all of that for me and I just show up and do what they tell me to do, for me it's not as much fun. I want to do it all by myself. So that was why, and I didn't want to guide because I want to walk in silence. I just want to be present and just enjoy the view and the beauty, and I want to be completely by myself, which is hard on the trail because there are so many people that will see you by yourself and want to come over and chit chat with you, and I just wanted to be on my own. And so when I read that, I was heartbroken, and I had this moment of panic of how do I get out of this? Everything's already paid for. I had no plans on changing anything, so I didn't purchase travel insurance, so I wouldn't even be reimbursed. What do I do? And there was a lot of contemplation for me, and then I took a couple days and I calmed down, and I went back and I read the letter again, and I read it very carefully, and the legal professional in me came out, and I just researched more. And if you understand the geography of Everest Base Camp Trail, the national parks is not the entire trail. It's only that you needed a guide through the national parks. And that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So anything that isn't in the national park, it's really, there are locals that live there. The locals typically live in the tea houses that they run, or even if they just have a little restaurant, typically when no one's eating in there or in the evening, they fold down the benches, they lay out blankets, and the whole family sleeps right there in the kitchen. Like, it's just the one room. There are no bedrooms. It's just the restaurant that they live in. And then in the morning at breakfast time, they just put away all the bedding, and then you come in and you sit down where they were just sleeping. So it's a community, right? There are people that live there, and the government is not saying you have to have a guide to walk where the locals walk. They're saying that in the restricted national parks, they want you to have a guide. And my thought was like, I don't want a guide. Like, if they're trying to boost the economy and increase revenue going into the Everest region, why can't I just pay a fee and go by myself? And sure enough, there is a separate letter, which all of these are linked in the description below, that says that if you want to trek solo, if you're a solo trekker, you can go as an independent trekker. You just have to pay a fee. So essentially, you either pay the guide or you can pay the fee and go without the guide. So either way, they're getting their money. And if you read the first letter, it very clearly states that the purpose of requiring a guide is to provide more economic support for the locals. There's a lot of guides. Like, everyone is a guide. Everyone you meet, everyone you bump into, everyone you talk to will say, I'm a guide. Do you want to hire me? I'm a guide. Everyone's a guide, right? So they're just trying to find work for all of their guides. I can imagine that there might be more guides than there are trekkers. So I can imagine why the government is trying to do this. So go back and read the very first letter very clearly. It says that you need a guide through the national parks. The separate letter that covers the area of those national parks and through Everest says that if you want to trek solo, you just simply buy the permit. Okay, so it's a trek card. So this is what the trek card looks like. Here is mine. And it costs 2,000 rupees. When I purchased it, I paid 5,000 Nepalese rupees, and it was for this and my permit to get through both the national parks. If you go with the guide, you'll pay the guide ahead of time, and then the guide will go and pay for these for you, and you just sit on a bench and you have no idea what they're doing. Again, I like to be part of the process, so I just simply took an extra 5,000 Nepalese rupees with me and purchased this. So yes, you can trek solo completely by yourself, or if you wanted to, you can hire a guide, and you'll need a guide through the national parks. The problem with a law that requires a guide through the national parks, unless you purchase the trek card, is that no guide is going to go with you just through the national parks. And they likely won't let you use, like, they don't want you to pay for just a guide. They're going to say, well, we'll be your guide, but you have to hire our porters, and you have to stay at the tea houses we suggest because we get extra money for that. Like, we get a kickback, and like, you have to do all these things, and then all of a sudden, like, you've ended up with this whole big package instead of just a guide. So the law, to me, like, it doesn't work to actually just get a guide. Like, it seems more reasonable that if you have to get a guide, you're going to get a guide and a porter, and your tea house is covered, and you're going to be paying for all these extra things. So that's what the letters say. Okay, so you can go, if you wanted to trek solo and you want to get the trek card, you land at Lukla, and then you go through the gate and you begin your walk. And I went the wrong direction several times because I could not find it, but it's simply along your path. So you just follow the signs to the next town, and you just keep walking. So you just keep following the signs to Lukla. You go through a shopping area, and then eventually you see a sign past all the restaurants that will say trek card, and you go down the steps, and that is where you find a booth. You pay your fee, you get your cards and your permit, and then you're on your way. It's more than just a fee. It's a way to keep track of trekkers. So no one is just roaming completely by themselves. There are checkpoints. And if I remember correctly, there's maybe 5 or so different checkpoints, and they're military checkpoints. So it's generally young men and women in military uniforms. They have big weapons, and so you can't get through if you're solo, unless you have the Trek card. If you go with the guiding company, they have a TIMS card, and it's something that the company does, and you're generally not any part of the process. But again, you'll sit down on a bench and your guide will go up and take care of everything for you, and then you'll just continue on. But your guide will have your permits and stuff. So the process isn't any different. It's just whether you're doing it or whether the guide is doing it. So when you get to the checkpoints, you just simply hand them your card. They scan it, and then the system will keep track of you to make sure that you haven't just disappeared. And then once you get through all the checkpoints, you're good and you're done. So the Trek card has a barcode, on the back, and it allows you to scan it with your cell phone and to get more information if you want to navigate on your phone. The Trek card also gives a list of emergency numbers, as well as a little bit more information. So it's a really good resource. I felt completely fine trekking on my own. I wasn't worried about anything besides running out of money, and then obviously like the altitude sickness, but I was perfectly fine. If you go with a guide, you would still face all the same issues. You would just face them with an entire group, and you have to go at the group's pace. So for me, I would much more prefer to go at my own pace, especially if I'm not feeling well. So that is how you trek solo. Again, if you want to do it, you buy a Trek card and you do it when you get there. You do it when you start the trail. You pay your 5,000 rupees and you get your permits also to the parks, and off you go. You will need a way to organize your card and to keep track of it, because it isn't really announced ahead of time when you're going to get to a checkpoint. And if you get there and you're not prepared, then you have to take a step back and you have to like set your bag down and dig everything out. And that did happen to me 1 or 2 times, when it's just I turned a corner and then all of a sudden there was a checkpoint and I didn't have my card ready, or my card and my permits got separated and I had to dig and find them. So a system that worked really well for me is I just took my passport, and I had ordered the plastic holders so that I could have a sleeve and places to store and put my stuff for my passport. And on the inside, it has some pockets, and I simply just slipped my Trek card with my permits into the pocket, and then at the checkpoint, I could just pull my whole passport out, and the passport book is big and bright, and it's really easy to find, so I didn't ever have to worry about losing anything. And then when I get up there, I would just hand the military personnel, I would just hand them my whole passport, and I would open it up to the page with the card. They would scan it, and they would look at my permits, and everything would all be together, and they would hand it back to me, and I would be on my way. So this worked really well for me. And if you're looking for a recommendation, I highly recommend getting some of these passport sleeve covers, and they even come with some little protective pouches as well that you could use. And then my passport, I kept it in a fanny pack, and these are like the ultralight. These are amazing. I love these, and they have a little tiny pouch, and they're stuff. So they're just like little stuff pouches. So when you're not using them, you can stuff them down into almost nothing, put them in the little sleeve, and just toss them in your bag. But what I did is I had one green one and one black one, and my black one had like my daily money, and I had a very limited supply in money here just in case it got stolen or I misplaced it, or if it fell out of my bag. If anything happened, if I lost it, I would only lose a very small portion of money, just enough money for that day, like until I got to bed at night, was in this one. And then my big stash of money and anything important, anything that I wanted to keep at the very bottom of my bag that I would be devastated if I lost, would go in the green one. So I would put my passport, and I have my immunization card in there, and then some extra passport photos. Remember to take some extra passport photos with you. And I'm very proud of these ones because this is my first self-portrait. Isn't it beautiful? It's the first time I took my own photo, and I did that for my passport. So I love it. So like my private information, but so immunization records and photos and all of your solo trek stuff can go right in your passport. I stuck this in my green fanny pack with the rest of my cash, like the cash that I had to get me through the whole entire trek, which is supposed to be about 12 to 14 days. All of that was here. So when I got to a checkpoint, I would take off my bag and set my bag on the bench, and then I would put the fanny pack on so that I didn't have to worry about setting it down anywhere. Like, I'm terrible about, like, if something's in my hand, I will set it down, and then I probably will get to chatting and I'll walk away without it. So I strap it to my body. It's not going anywhere, and then I would just lift my passport out, hand it to the checkpoint attendant, put it back in, walk back over to my pack, take it off, and then bury it at the bottom of my bag again. So, and then the bright green helped it to be really easy to spot, especially because it was tucked in at the bottom of my bag. So I didn't want anyone else to find it easily if someone got a hold of my whole pack. But this was easy for me to find once I buried it in my bag. So that is what I did. That is how I trek solo. I hope that helps, but I will mention that the laws might change again. So this is just what I did. So I'm not suggesting that anyone else just take my word for it. So please do your own research and look up the laws and try to find the law itself and read the law as opposed to articles, because I have had a lot of people in the last couple weeks forward articles to me and say this news article says you can't trek solo. The thing is that, again, like, news reporters are typically not legal professionals, and as a legal professional myself, I can tell you always go to the source of a law. So if an article says you have to have a guide to do the Everest Base Camp Trek, look up the law, right? So hopefully the news article is going to be repeatable and it will actually list where you can find the law. So look up the law. So please don't just go by articles alone. And please don't, just don't listen to like word of mouth that it might be wrong. So when I first got to Kathmandu, I did try to find a guide, and that's how I know it's not possible or feasible to get a guide through just the national parks. But when I got there, every single guide, and this is nothing against the guides, but they would tell me like, oh, you're gonna do the trek, like, you can't go alone, right? Like, you have to like hire us, like you have to hire a guide. And it was really frustrating because everyone was telling me the same thing. And again, it's just, there's just so much wrong information about this. It was everyone. It was the hotel attendants, it was the taxi driver, it was people at the airport, it was every single person is like, what are you doing? Like, you can't trek alone. And it was really, really frustrating. So if you do go alone, just again, look up the most current law. I would suggest even printing it out, because you never know if somewhere along the way, like, you need to show it to someone to be like, no, this is what it said. I remember even at the end of my trek when I was totally done, I called the embassy, the US embassy in Kathmandu, and they're like, no, you can't trek alone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how does nobody know the law? So again, laws change. They change all the time. They change frequently. So if you're gonna go and you want to go solo, great. I'm here to support you. I will cheer you on. But just double check the law before you go. Make sure that you find the source of the law and read that, and not just a hearsay article. And I'm sure you'll be fine. So please let me know if you have any questions. I hope this is helpful. So just in case it helps, I have linked the products that I shared with you down below. They're all things that I bought myself with my own money and that I use. I love them. I will continue to use them. So if you'd like a personal recommendation, they're linked below. That's the way, I like it, Do you remember my new song? On my way to Dinkboshe. Is that how it goes? I don't feel like that's not the right melody. Day 6. On my way to Dinkboshe. Yeah, I'm gonna have a soundtrack. Gonna have an Everest Base Camp Trek soundtrack. On my way to Dinkboshe. I'm gonna have to look it up. Trek card. That's all you need. Trek card. How good is your vision? Can you see all that? This is the only plastic you'll ever need. Trek card. That's the way, I checked to Everest Base Camp. Fanny pack, oh fanny pack. I am a Trek card. Take me on your trek. Welcome to Lukla, Amanda Martin. No, it's deeper. Welcome to Lukla, Amanda Martin. Yeah, I think I got it that time. Welcome to Lukla, Amanda Martin.